Hello, everybody, and welcome to a Monday episode of Titanic Talks, June 7th, 2021. Had to check my watch there. Hello, how are you? How was your weekend? I hope it was good. I had a very relaxing weekend, which is how I like them. Had a nice, you know what? I rewatched some of my favorite movies because I had some time in the evening to pop some corn. And I gotta say, Jackie Brown, wow, Pam Grier, so good. I feel like that's one of the unsung Tarantino movies, and I've kind of been on a kick lately with going further and further back. Really, to tell you the truth, what I've been into lately is finding the movies that have inspired my favorite directors. And so I've been watching a lot of kind of oldies, I guess you might say. A lot of black and white. Which I like. I used to be one of those kids who wanted to be a director and couldn't or didn't appreciate the things that propelled cinema. I thought, I always liked kind of raunchy and avant-garde comedies. And kind of, shoot 'em up, bang, bang kind of things like that. And of course, Spielberg's work from an early age. But then I kind of got more into the Sofia Coppola kind of the beauty and aesthetic elements. And then as I learned more about the directors that I loved, started kind of finding out, how did they combine the things they love to come up with their own flavor of filmmaking. And Paul Thomas Anderson is one of my favorite directors of all time. Maybe my favorite. It's like, your favorite band or, it's always changing. But the past couple years, it's been Paul Thomas Anderson. And every time I sit down to write a screenplay, I realize that I'll never write anything as good as him. From the jump, he was just on top of it. And I absolutely love his work. And I had heard that his favorite movie was The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. And it is absolutely mind-blowing. I highly recommend it. And absolutely made me feel like a human being. And I notice now, though, after being, I suppose, in an adult life's work of being consumed with directing and writing and cinematography on the visual end of my career. Now when I go back and I watch movies that are in black and white, I tend to appreciate them a lot more because I'm more familiar with exposure. And I think a good trick when I'm taking photos, or a lot of the time when I'm watching my monitor, I'll flip it back and forth between color and black and white. Almost always when I'm taking photos, I shoot film, but my primary still camera is digital. And I'm going to do a video about that because there are thousands of cameras, digital cameras, and at this point in my life, I feel as though I have tested all of them in an attempt to find the perfect one, and the closest I have found is the Olympus Pen F, which is what I use. and I'm gonna do a video about that. Maybe that's the video I'll put out this Wednesday for our new shorter video series where I talk about how I do stuff, and a lot of it's probably wrong, but hey, it's how I do it. But that's a great camera, and I guess it's maybe a little outdated these days. I've had it for a couple years, but I've flown around the world several times with it. I just wanted something I could throw in my bag, and I wasn't super precious about, but it had to be small enough to fit in a small bag, or I can just wear it on my shoulder. And that has been the most fun I've ever had with a digital camera. There's something to be said about shooting film. And I learned how to shoot film on a Canon FT series. I shot 35 millimeter when I learned how to develop film on a FTQL. And those are fun cameras. I hear the AE ones are very popular with people who are just kind of getting into shooting 35 millimeter full manual. But the FTQL was the one that I learned on. And I find that the Olympus Pen F it feels similar. It kind of has like I've actually seen criticisms of it, of people saying like, oh, they're just chasing, they want it to look like a vintage camera, but it takes a beautiful picture, and I shoot more micro 4/3 lenses on my video camera, so I can use all my same lenses. And I like the small format. And don't get me wrong, I love a full frame camera, and a lot of the stuff for years with stills when I was shooting on 5Ds, 5D2, 5D3 for a long time, I would use the L series Canon lenses, which are gorgeous, but they're big. And when touring and when kind of, I guess, traveling the world, I really don't like checking bags. I try to get everything into a backpack and a carry-on, so I needed something small and versatile. So we'll get more into that though, because that's kind of some fun stuff. But when I'm shooting on that camera, in the LCD viewfinder, you can switch it to be color or black and white, and I find for exposure, and I guess my eye is kind of more drawn to the limitation of black and white. I don't get distracted by one certain color or hue, and I think that makes me focus a little bit more on what I am taking a picture of. I've had a couple people ask if I'm going to talk more about photography. I don't consider myself a photographer. Maybe a cinematographer, but it's just I know so many incredible photographers that I almost feel unworthy of the label. I've heard the thing at camera stores, especially if you're looking at like high-end cameras, a lot of the times the salesman will say, like with a Hasselblad or an expensive camera, they'll point at the cheaper ones and like those cameras take pictures, but this camera takes photographs. And I just go, okie dokie. I bet you that works on a lot of people. So photography, it's something I've never felt confident in. I guess I don't really feel confident in much, with things that I make, because I always have that thing of, my philosophy is always, it's better than perfect. It's done. So everything I do, I mean, the video I put out last week, all I can think about, the one about my Blackmagic Pocket camera, all I can think about now, I think it's, hey, I think this is probably entertaining for people. And I guess the content and the idea I was trying to portray was there. But, now I watch it and I'm like, why did that upload so dark? it looks like a stop and a half or almost 2 full stops darker than what I rendered. So I'm learning how to compensate for that with the color correction on these, or the color grading rather. And this weekend I have been watching tutorials on power grades. Pretty fun stuff if you're into incredibly boring color science, but there's only one way to get better and to learn with these kind of things. And I think the change that I've made since being locked down was I'm going to force myself to do all of these things, or at least learn to my best ability the things that I would usually just hand off to someone else. But just with everything, especially in creative work, the more informed we are of, even if it's just like a little bit of every aspect or element, the more informed we are, I think the more informed our direction or our final product can be. And when it comes to collaborating with someone, I always felt just like I didn't know anything about when speaking to a colorist, shooting all this footage for a music video or a show, and just kind of handing it off and maybe being like, yeah, maybe kind of something like this, and send them like a mood board or a style board, or maybe some screenshots of inspiration. But I'd like to be able to understand more about film stock emulation and how to implement contrast appropriately. And I'm enjoying it. It's pretty fun stuff. And it makes me really, I don't know if maybe not ironically, but it makes me want to shoot film more. Something that's really cool, I find that I have almost always done on set, is while on set, either myself or my DP or DIT, the digital intermediate technician, which are usually, my best friends and who I kind of hang out with most while working, because we're crafting the image. One of us will have a 35 millimeter camera loaded with Cinestill film, which is motion picture 35 millimeter film, and one frame at a time. It's just stills, but it's the same film that they use in movies, which not a lot of movies really shoot on film anymore anyway, but you get it developed and you can kind of see if we had shot it on 35 millimeter motion picture film, what it would have looked like. And every time I'm usually like, oh man, this really would have looked cool. I have a couple photos in my personal archive collection of music videos that I've done where I have 35 millimeter scans, and they look really, really cool. I've always wanted to blow them up and do like an exhibition or something like that, but that's kind of something I learned, putting all my eggs in one basket, working with one person almost exclusively for so long, and now it's just like, oh, well, now all my photos are that, and so it's just like, maybe it'll just live on a hard drive. So kind of a bummer, but it's cool. It's cool to have the multiple formats, even if it's just one still image. It's still cool to have that. And I think shooting film is something that if you haven't done it, it's kind of a cool process, and you don't have to develop it yourself. And I understand it is more expensive, but it's not out of reach, especially if you're just getting into taking photos or photography. And maybe you're about to make your first big purchase for a camera. Maybe you've got like $500 to $1,000 that you're putting away. You can find one of those used AE1s or FT-QLs. You can find those dirt cheap, and they're built really well. So chances are, there's not a ton of like mechanical parts other than like, making sure the shutter works and advances and all that stuff. But the ones I learned on, you would hand wind the film, and there's kind of, I guess what I'm getting at is like the older cameras, the vintage cameras, tend to hold up very well, and you can get them for so cheap. And then all that money that you would have spent on a fancy new digital camera, you could put that into film. So that it kind of balances itself out. And you can always, when you get your film processed, just send it off, and they'll send you high resolution scans. And usually, if you're sending it off to a place that, like a good place, they're going to have a crazy scanner that's going to be way better than anything someone in their house would have. And it's a different philosophy. You don't get to immediately see it, but that's part of the excitement, getting a roll of film back. I have a couple from a couple years ago that I actually haven't developed yet. I should do that. And it's fun. You find you forgot about certain exposures, and there's a magic element to it. And when I'm making stuff, I tend to not do playback. I think even though it's very easy, especially if I'm working with actors or actresses, I don't want to influence any sort of self-doubt or self-confidence, maybe, positively or negatively, on set. I'd rather and I guess that's kind of, if you're a director, it's kind of your responsibility when you got it. It's like, yeah, we got it. Let's move on. Because I find I've seen these sets before that were not my sets, and you'll do a take, and then everyone comes through, and let's say a music video, and then the artist is watching the playback, and then of course the manager's there. Maybe there's agents there, people from the label, and no matter, it can be perfect. By the way, it can be absolutely perfect. And someone is going to say, well, what if we changed this? And it's never good for productivity. And it's kind of one of those things, like, you can't be the one to be like, hey, how many of these have you made? Oh, none? We should listen to you. But you can't do that. So I find something that's been very helpful in just moving things along and making sure you get to all of the other things that you need to get to. And I've been criticized for this before on set, but at a certain point I had to start saying, like, no, because inevitably it'll get to that point where, hey, can we watch this back? Maybe if you've got a little extra time and you're excited, and everyone kind of needs to make sure that if you maybe you're doing a big camera movement or a big jib kind of movement, or there's a lot of like lighting cues that have to hit, and then you get it right and everyone's excited. It's like, hey, check this out. But if it's just like from a place of like vanity, I just don't think that's the best way to keep things moving. And I just kind of had to get to a point where it's like, oh yeah, I don't really do that. Like, I'm happy to send you a hard drive of everything, and I'll make you, proxies and put a LUT on them so they look decent. But usually it's that whole process can be cumbersome if you're always going back and forth and, hey, look at this. And I was just listening to an interview about, it was actually Brad Pitt, and he was talking about working on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and how they shot it 35 millimeter film, and you can't do that. And that's the way it was forever until digital cameras came out, or until playback came out. And it's just like, well, hope we got it. But then I think that ups the ante for the talent, and also for production, and definitely for the director. Like, you really got to know, like, okay, we got that one, and just go with your gut and go for it. But I suppose this kind of goes into the category that we kind of explore in these videos here quite often of process, because this is the first time in my career that I've discussed process, and it seems as though there's some people out there who are interested. And one of the most common things I say in regards to, because another thing that happens, I mean, this happened recently on a shoot. And we're shooting in the treatment, and the script called for a dingy, kind of gross warehouse. That's where this scene was happening. And some of the people on the agent management side were disappointed in the location. And, it just kind of has to be like, well, we went over this for a month, and scouted the location and sent photos. Everyone approved this. And, people were not feeling comfortable, even though what we were getting on camera was amazing. It looked so cool and so good. But the people who, this isn't their world, creating things. They're very good at managing things, but creating things, it's not where they've spent their entire life. And they were uncomfortable, and I kind of had to, and I've had to kind of pull this line out more than I would like to. But at a certain point, it's just like, hey, no one wants to see how the sausage is made. And good golly, some of the things that I've been a part of that on camera look great, and people watching it at home would never realize how not pretty it was to get it to look like that. And I mean, even this, I have this kind of lit in a specific way, but from my perspective, I mean, it doesn't look good. And if you don't maybe have an understanding of what each of these individual tools does, it might look less than satisfactory. But that is the power of the imagination. And if you have an active imagination, that is a gift. So my advice would be, if you're getting pushback creatively, well, if it's the people financing your project, give them a smile and hey, great suggestion. Excuse me. That's kind of more of an interpersonal, how you handle those things. And I think just with practice and time, that's kind of the only way to to kind of master that. And I'm still working on that, but, you know, it's a dance that we all have to do, and it's a balancing act, and, keeping everyone happy while getting what you need to get to make sure that the project, is as awesome as it could be or should be. And especially if you're working to make someone else look larger than life, you know, it's our responsibility to promote them in the best way, and literally shine them in the best light. And we kind of have to do a bit of a dance to make that happen. And I think actually more than anything, that has probably been the Achilles heel for a lot of careers that I've seen. Well, more so in music, where they don't quite get the human part. And I think you'll find with a lot of artists in the music world, definitely, but just in the creative realm in general, there can be a lot of very strong opinions, and those can be, no one wants to work with someone who's difficult. It's as simple as that. And some of the most talented people I've ever met in my life have been equally I don't know if difficult's the right word, but combative in being a part of the team, because that's very important. Teamwork makes the dream work. Cheesy, yes. True, double yes. I did get to shoot motion picture film once, and that was a lot of fun. It reminded me actually of, I don't know if I've talked about this, but my first real job, well, I got technically, everyone always says like, oh, my first job, I was, delivering papers and when I was in 5th grade or whatever, which I did like that. I guess technically that would be my first job. Everything I ever did in life, though, it was pretty crystal clear to me. It was always like, probably, I don't know, the earliest memory, maybe like 6 years old, something like that. And I remember like wanting a toy or something, or maybe it was like a Sega game. And I just remember my father saying something along the lines of, "Well, that's cool. So how are you going to get that? How are you going to work to make money to get that?" And so I'd like mow the lawn, or this was up in Michigan, so I'd shovel the driveway, things like that. But I remember wanting to get a BMX bike, and I was probably in 5th grade, and I wanted a Diamondback Joker. That was the bike that I wanted. And at the time, I want to say that was like $600. So as a youngster, 5th grade, 6th grade, that was quite a bit of money. I guess for a bike, it still is kind of a lot of money, for a bicycle. And, it was like, well, I guess I could mow lawns, and I suppose shoveling driveways. I don't know if a lemonade stand is really my cup of tea, cup of lemonade. And I had some friends who had paper routes. And this was for the Saginaw News, my hometown of Saginaw, Michigan. And there's some great people there. and I got a paper route, and it happened to be in my neighborhood. So I found out that the kid who was doing it previous to me was going to stop doing it. He was getting a job, and I had my mountain bike, but I wanted my BMX bike. I wanted it really, really, really bad. So I talked to the kid who was doing it, and I took over his route, and I shadowed him, went along with him for a couple days and figured out how it works. And I did that for, I don't know, maybe 2 years, something along those lines. It was probably, it would have been like 12 or 13. So whatever age you are there, probably, 6th grade, 6th, 7th grade, maybe. And rain or shine, you'd have to go. The truck would drop the newspapers on the corner, and I would take my little bags, my shoulder bags, and I just remember how dirty the ink would make my fingers as I would roll them up and then put them in a rubber band and put them in the bag. And in the summer months, usually, it was very easy. Sometimes I could fit them all into one bag and they'd be light and you could fold them 3 times really easy. But then the winter months and, Christmas, and suddenly all the advertisements were being there and you couldn't even fold them in half because they were so big. And I would have to put them in bags. And I think probably, I don't know, maybe there was like 130 houses on the route, something like that. So I'd have these just giant bags on my bike, and it'd be snowing in the winter, and there would be the people Sunday morning, and they would wake up at 5 a.m. and expect their paper to be right there. And it was, I did that every single day for a very long time. But finally I was able to get enough money for that bike, and I bought it. It was chrome, and it was the Diamondback Joker, and I thought it was just the coolest thing, and I would ride around, and I put pegs on it, and would try to do bunny hops. And there was a little, in the woods nearby, there was a little trail that had jumps. But the funny thing is, and kind of maybe the moral of this story, because it was so much lower to ride, because on a BMX bike, it's your positioning and your posture is much different than being on kind of a mountain bike with way bigger wheels. And at that time, I was starting to get a little bit taller. And so I would take my Diamondback Joker bike, and it was a lot harder to ride the bike. It made it way more inconvenient to deliver my papers. And I remember the bags, because I was so low, the bags would hit the back spokes, and it would slow me down, so I had to pedal harder, and it was just uncomfortable. And I think I learned a bit of a lesson there, and I did that until I was 15 years old, and a friend of my family was a manager at a local movie theater. And this was when I was just kind of getting into becoming, I guess, obsessed with cinema for the first time. And you had to be 16 years old to work there. And around that time, I was like, I'd had the bicycle for a couple of years, and I was getting to that age where friends were starting to get their driver's license, and people were starting to get cars. And I remember just thinking, like, well, I spent all my money on this bike. Now I need a car. I mean, it was a couple of years, but so I need to get a job that pays a little bit more money, and I can work more hours. And I just thought it was the coolest thing to work at a movie theater. And so family friend was a manager there, and I begged for a job. And they're like, you got to be 16 to work here. And I was just like, I think I was like 2 months shy. And I finally convinced them to hire me. And I have to say, I think that was my favorite job I've ever had in my entire life. There are moments, where I've considered like buying a movie theater. But then I realized I would lose all of my money. But it'd be cool to have one, you know. There's a theater down here, just a tiny little, just a couple screens out in the country down here in Texas that I like to go to. And I have a bit of a fantasy of like, oh, maybe I'll buy this one day. It's just so cool. It's so old school. And I think, you know, just that it's a nostalgic thing for sure. I mean, do you feel that way? Like when you look back on maybe like your teenage years, you had a job or something that you did. And now when you kind of revisit those, I mean, my example is a movie theater. Every time I go to a movie theater, I think of all of the memories. I worked there for years, all throughout high school. And I just absolutely loved it. It was so awesome. And my whole goal the entire time was I wanted to be a projectionist, because that was kind of like the cool kid move. And they were all kind of like stoners, and you wouldn't really see them a lot. But I think they realized very quickly that I could sell things. So I was that kid covered in popcorn grease, with my head inside of a 400 degree, no, not 400 degrees, but inside of a hot popper, for, you know, hours at a time. But I absolutely loved that job. And the friends who worked there, yeah, some of my favorite people I ever worked with, I hope they're doing well. Bianca and Kalitha, they were just two of my favorite people I've ever met in my life, and they were so sweet. And we worked together all the time. And yeah, we were just kind of like a little family over there, and it would get so wild. Big movie nights, you know. Well, obviously this doesn't happen anymore, but every once in a while I'd work out the front and I'd sell tickets, you know, at the little ticket booth. And but most of the time I was, you know, we had to slang those popcorn combos, which, by the way, I read somewhere, and I totally agree with this. I guess one of the highest marked up products in the world is popcorn, for how much it actually costs and how much they sell it for. I mean, the degrees of magnitude that they're making a profit on is completely outrageous. But there's nothing quite like it. It's like Disneyland. Everyone complains about how expensive it is. It's like, yeah, but go to Disneyland and tell me you had like a bad time. That place is just masterfully curated and designed to just work, down to, I mean, what's the classic thing? Walt Disney said, and this is true, it only takes 40 steps from any position in Disneyland to find a trash can. And that's because it takes about 40 steps for him to eat a hot dog. And it's just like all of those things. They pump in the smells as you walk into each area. The music's different. I always just love Disneyland for that. But, you know, I grew up in Michigan, so I think the closest thing to having like that kind of a magical experience was being at the movie theater, and then being able to work there, and find out how the moving parts worked and everything. There was a lot of like mystery and magic for me, even though a lot of times I was just kind of back there just like sweeping up vomit. Or, I mean, this is in Saginaw, Michigan, and if anyone's watching this and you've visited the great state of Michigan and had the absolute pleasure to spend time in Saginaw, or go to a movie theater in Saginaw, as someone who spent years cleaning up people's leftovers, we had a lot of empty Hennessy bottles, and There'd be a lot of empty Crown Royale bottles, and we have some country folk up there, so the amount of times I've reached into the cup holder to take the cup out, and my hand just dipped right into someone's dip cup. If you're unfamiliar with dip, it's chewing tobacco, and you spit your remnants out into a cup. And I have put my hand in that several times. Probably my least favorite thing ever. But really, those were the only bad parts. But every once in a while, there would be we would have some crazy, it would be a huge movie. There were several times. And around this time when I worked there, like Shrek had just come out. That was a big one. The Passion of the Christ came out. And that was wild because we would have, these people from churches come in, and they would just, first thing in the morning, and this happened for weeks, they would come in first thing in the morning and just buy out every screen, which in our theater, I think it was 12 screens, 10 or 12 screens, and it was screening on maybe 3 or 4 of those screens. It was a big movie. Was breaking all these box office records, but we would have these people from the churches come, and they would just say, hey, I want to buy every ticket for every showing today, and whoever wants to watch it can watch it. And we're like, whoa. So if you were working the ticket booth, you were pretty much done for the day. But I just remember these times where there would be so many people. And it was just fun. These days would just fly by because you just get the rushes, and you'd have a couple minutes to kind of regroup, eat some popcorn, and then keep going. And there was a couple times where back when movies, and by the way, I'm old enough to where when I first started working there, all of the movies were still being projected on film. So once a week or whatever it was, the distributors would kind of come through, and they would drop the movies off, and they would be in these big cans, and then you'd have to build them on platters, which were just these huge circles, and then you would have to take all the cans of film and then stitch them together to make the film. And sometimes those would malfunction if there's like a lot of static electricity. Certain times of the year there'd be more static electricity, and sometimes the film would cling to something it shouldn't within the projector, and you would get a brain wrap, and that can cause the projector to malfunction, and that's not good. And so there were several times where it would just be a busy day, and you'd get called in and be like, oh, we got a brain wrap. And so I would go up to the projection booth where all the projectors are in a row. And sometimes I would just have to stand there with my finger on the platter to keep it from the static electricity from feeding it into the wrong place. And on those projectors, actually, there was a little thing on the side. They were big boys, but there was a little window on the side that you could open up, and it would project onto the floor. And we had a little knob for a speaker, and so you could just watch the movie, which I did. But really, the gangster move there was to work in the back stand. That was the one where it was back, the snack stand where you could get your refills, and typically you were alone back there. And I liked that. It was nice and quiet, and it was dark. And I liked being kind of back there in the dark theater, being illuminated by an orange glow from a popcorn machine. And around that time, I was just starting to play in bands. And I had all of these aspirations and hopes and dreams. And my friends who worked there, we would coordinate. I worked there when Napoleon Dynamite came out, and we would take shifts, leaving our respective posts to sneak in as employees to watch the scenes from Napoleon Dynamite over and over and over again. It was a really fun time. And it's fun to think back, it's just kind of the innocence of being a teenager. And I remember just how crazy it was because, that was my first job. And I would get paychecks and just be like, wow, I can spend money. It was a very strange thing for me because I never had money growing up. And then, the time came to go to college or enter the workforce. And I was very lucky to have had an opportunity with a large company who noticed my skills with video and editing. And at that time, we didn't even have YouTube or really internet video at all. I mean, there were like, you could spend all day to upload like a 1-minute clip to a QuickTime player, but someone had to have a server for that, and we didn't have YouTube at that time, and it's just really kind of wild to think how far things have come. Now, I do everything from my own studio. And I can just work from home if I want. I mean, we kind of have to now, right? But it really kind of makes me wonder, like, what's going to happen to movie theaters? It's a part of life. Truly, for me as a kid, it was kind of like going to Disneyland, going to the movies. It was just that was the only real escape, because Saginaw, Michigan, especially when I was there, I know things are kind of starting to turn around there. Saginaw, Flint, and Detroit. I mean, I'm sure you've heard something along the lines about the difficulties that they've kind of been going through. When your entire livelihood is dependent on an industry that just leaves completely, it's going to take some time to get back on your feet. So my whole family's there, and a lot of my best friends are there. So I'm hopeful, and we'll see what happens. But I've seen so many of these shows. I just rewatched one recently, actually, as I've been kind of rewatching Anthony Bourdain's shows. He did an episode on Parts Unknown in Detroit. And it's always kind of strange watching those, because growing up, it was just that my reference point for a very long time was that cities were just empty. I mean, you would see stuff in the movies, but it wasn't my reference point. Growing up, like the only time as a kid going downtown in Detroit was like the Thanksgiving parade, which I don't even know if they do that anymore. Every once in a while there would be some event, but and when you're young, you don't understand how things work. I would imagine maybe it's similar to someone who grew up in New York City. Maybe when you're very young, maybe there's kind of like an idea that, oh, this is just how it is everywhere. Maybe it's slightly different, but for me, it was just the only big city I knew was Detroit, and it was empty. And especially going back, if I'm talking when I was 6-7 years ago, or 6-7 years old. It's almost 30 years ago. But yeah, like 25 years ago, I would argue I don't know if it was worse. It was just you always hear about like the crime and all that stuff, which does happen, and maybe I have a skewed perspective on it. I don't know. I'm thinking out loud here. But Detroit to me was always just empty, desolate, you know. Danny Brown has I think it was on Triple X. I think that was maybe the album. Anyway, he has a quote and he says, "Where I'm from, it's field, field, house, house, field, 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 house." And I remember hearing that. I think I lived in LA actually at the time when that came out, or when I heard it. And I was like, oh, hey, he nailed it. Yeah. But I would recommend, and I have recommended, because people are always really interested when you know, they ask where you're from. Usually I'll say, do you know where Detroit is? Just because it's so much easier, because most people haven't heard of Saginaw. So just for the ease of conversation, like it's around Detroit, kind of like that. But I've heard it described as, and I hate saying this, but I've heard it described by a lot of people is that Flint is Detroit's even more troubled little brother, and Saginaw is the even more troubled little brother. I don't know, because I was in the suburbs, so there's kind of like a willful ignorance. That might be the wrong way of looking at it, actually. Maybe not ignorant, but naive, because I think ignorance is kind of more of a quality of people who are older and should have taken the time to become aware of how the world works. Whereas if you're naive to something, maybe it's just you haven't had the time to become ignorant. But I think I was very naive. And I think by the time I was old enough to kind of have an understanding of where I'm from, I was so eager to just get out, because I had a taste of other cities. And as someone who wanted to work on movies and music, it was just like, you went to New York or you went to Hollywood. And so that's what I did. So that was kind of maybe a glimpse into the life of a teenage version of me, at least when it comes to like real life, like what I was doing, just working at a movie theater and really enjoying it. And I do miss the people that I worked with, because they were a lot of fun. And that's kind of one of those things, especially, growing up in Saginaw, it was a melting pot. There was a lot of a surprising amount of diversity for how much of a cultural vacuum it was. I don't really know how it is now, but I was, and then that's kind of one of those things. Maybe if you live in a place that's a bit economically depressed, and you're working just like you're doing what you got to do to pay the bills, and just taking a job. It's kind of one of the cool things. I think the big takeaway working at that movie theater is it was people from the inner city, it was people from the country, it was people from just like the burbs. And we all just needed jobs, and then suddenly you're spending 8 hours every day with people that maybe you wouldn't necessarily go out of your way to spend 8 hours talking to. And that's kind of something that I've been missing. I have this fantasy. I'm sure, my I think those close to me now, I talk about this quite often, actually. I'll be out to eat or on an airplane. I always have the thing like, oh, that might be fun to be like a flight attendant for a while. Or pretty much any time I'm at a place that has a bar, I'm always like, hey, should I just go back there and start bartending? And whoever I'm with, they're just like, you're completely insane. But I feel like I need that. And maybe that's like a post lockdown thing. I don't know. But that, and it's great. And especially, I don't want to sound like I'm complaining here, because I think in doing these videos and, I knew I was feeling that, and that's a big reason of why I started doing is because I wanted to have some sort of community. Don't get me wrong, my family and my friends and those closest to me are always there, and we talk often, and I think the place in my life I'm at right now, those bonds and relationships have never been more open or stronger. But still, there's that thing. I find myself now going out to eat, just spending way more time talking to, the hostess or the host or whoever's serving or the bartender, and just kind of talking. I don't know. How do you feel about that? Do you feel that way? I know a lot of y'all are just you're in places now where you're just starting to kind of open up and go places and not have to wear a mask. And I wonder if that's like a psychological thing of like seeing other people's faces for the first time in a long time. And I feel this just human need to be like, hey, let's just talk about something. Weird times, huh? Very weird times. What do you think about the blue light? Feels good. I could do any color. I think blue is kind of fun. I figured maybe I'd wear stripes and a blue shirt. Why did I wear stripes? Because it's easier to focus. People have asked me that. Why do you wear stripes so much? Usually it's because most of the time when I'm shooting video, photo, I have to be my own stand-in to get focus right. And when I'm checking my monitors and checking for focus, I use focus assisting on my cameras, and these stripes will become bright green or bright red, and I'll know that I'm in focus. Watch this be out of focus. That'd be funny, actually. Anyway, this has been a fun one. I've been on a big music kick recently with songs that are involving keyboards and pianos, because I have been practicing a lot and really learning a lot, and trying to wrap my head around music theory. And so I've been on a big, I guess, kind of like classic rock, classic R&B, and classical music, kind of all over the place in that realm. And but I think if there's kind of one, I mean, I talked about this a little bit on the channel member video on Friday, but I've been listening to Supertramp a lot and learning all those songs, and that's been a lot of fun. Listen to a lot of Stevie Wonder and listening to a lot of the music of Nile Rodgers. he's someone who I think I can do maybe a whole episode on. So maybe I'll save kind of my key points of inspiration. But if I'm going to recommend anything, that's a good one. Just do a search on whatever music platform you use or streaming service, and check out Nile Rodgers especially if you're not familiar with him, and take a look at the career that guy's had. He's one of my top, and I've always wanted to talk to him, just to say thanks. Hey man, thank you. Also, how'd you do it? So, yeah, that's good stuff. I like the funk. Play that funky music, white boy. You know what I'm saying? I identify with that song because I like a good groove, and that's kind of the pursuit that I've been on recently with my music that I've been making. What is it? I don't even know. But hey, I'm just making more and more and more of it, and learning, continuing to hopefully get better. So I'm excited about that. And if you're looking for a movie to watch, I mean, The Treasure of the Sierra Madre is amazing. Jackie Brown I just rewatched. I had so much fun watching that. Was I supposed to talk more about that? No, I wanted to talk about the movie theater. Yeah, I think that those are really kind of the vibe I've been on these past couple days. Thank you for watching. I hope this was entertaining. I hope you enjoy the blue light. If you would like another one of these every week, you know the routine. Click the join button, and I do one of these every Friday as well. And I'll be back on Wednesday, or like last week, I was a day late. I apologize. Had technical difficulties. But gonna have another fun one for y'all on Wednesday. I'm just, I'm feeling the vibe here. I really am. I'm enjoying making videos again. And I was not enjoying it for a very long time. So to be back kind of feeling good about these, I'm happy if a handful of y'all enjoy them, and that makes me feel good. And cool. Yeah, rock and roll music, peace and love. I hope you have a good week, and I hope to see you next time. Take care. We'll see ya.